Greetings everyone. Welcome to today's lecture on Ganikas in early India, some dimensions. The perception of the Ganika, their role in the social ethos and cultural achievements have been demonstrated in various metaphors and statements. Ganikas had undoubtedly commanded a certain status within the socio-economic order of the period, which is exemplified by the contemporary texts. And one interesting aspect that emerges is that of their independent identity. The Ganikas claimed an identity that was independent and not derived from men. The very existence of the institution of the Ganikas outside the patriarchal system of gender relations has led to the kind of deviation in the society. The role and position of the Ganikas was under constant evolution with the socio-cultural economic evolution. The tradition that began in the urban centers in the mid first millennium BCE later was incorporated with the institution of prostitution and sex workers. The Ganika, though, was at variance with the sex workers and their altogether severance, however, from this profession was not always possible. Now, while on the one hand we say that Ganikas enjoyed some kind of independent authority as they were outside the pale of patriarchy, but still we cannot say that the aspect of male authority was not there. The male anxiety towards the institution was there right from the beginning. Female supremacy ruled the institution, be it the Ganikas or their mothers, yet male authority or the ruling authority was largely responsible in its formation, in the formative stage, and they were also involved in the proper functioning as well as appropriation of the material gains out of this profession. There was considerable fluidity, however. There were men who took part in the daily activities of the organization, from helping the Ganikas or their mothers in associating with rich men to solving quarrels in their business. There was fluidity in the notions of gender identity in the society in general as well as in the tradition of the Ganikas. Now, if we talk about the origin of Ganika culture, then Vedic texts do not refer to Ganikas. However, according to some historians, the contact with Indo-Greeks had some kind of an impact on genesis of Ganika culture. And Arth Shastra can be described as the first text to mention organized prostitution. Earliest text to give Ganika an exalted status was the Buddhist text Mahavagga, which mentioned Ambapali, who worshipped Buddha. Then the exalted social status of Ganikas was a reality definitely by Gupta period. Natya Shastra has mentioned several qualities of courtesans, which included light-heartedness and their expertise in fine arts like dance, music, singing, painting, etc. Now coming to a Ganika's dharma, the world of the Ganikas had regulations that were diverse from the usual patriarchal norms. The men, mainly belonging to the wealthy and the upper sections of the society, were their pleasure companions as well as the clientele who were the source of wealth. The Ganikas accompanied them to the goshtis, pleasure gardens, picnics, theatrical spectacles and various sports. So, this was an institution that was definitely related to the elite world, and it also demonstrates a part of elite lifestyle in the urban society of early historical period as well as in the early medieval cities, especially in the case of Ganikas, and they were not for mass consumption. Now, coming to the aspect of household and the socio-economic status of the Ganikas. If we consider the locality and the residence of the Ganikas, then the fact emerges that they were different from the elite patriarchal households or even the definitely from the royal households. The tradition of the Ganikas had a separate form of establishment in the society which was in variance with the other two forms of patriarchal setup. Its dissimilarity with the patriarchal household was continuous in all the phases of early Indian history. The residential division of the inner and outer quarters in the common and royal dwellings expected the family women to be confined to the inner apartments and the male members to be a part of both the inner as well as the outer sphere. Whereas in the Ganika residence, the women were the ones that operated and entertained the men in the outer space of the quarters. The residential location of the Ganika houses have been represented more explicitly in early medieval kavyas. With the decline of the urban centers, the Ganika and the Vaishya residences were found clustered in a specific part of the city. Now, when we are talking about the institution of Ganika, what emerges from the discussion is the aspect of female agency. The establishment of the Ganikas, the authority, their economic power at all times rested in the hands of the female members. The Ganika household, not altogether, however, was devoid of male members who acted as helpers in the establishment and assisted the Ganikas in their professional requirements. There was also representation of the idle male members in the literature of the times, especially the brother of the Ganika within the household. The reference to the father figure, however, was negligible as compared to the mother, who played a very important role in running the whole establishment. Then another change that one notices was a shift from an individual to the motherly authority. So, there was a change in the position of the Ganikas from an individual authoritative figure in her occupation to that of the one depending on the mother for counseling as well as management of the profession. The crucial role of the mother has been emphasized in the texts, especially from Gupta period onwards. So, the Ganika, who is portrayed as the independent and authoritative figure in her professional life and even of the household, is later on represented as the one who is under the constant watchfulness and supervision of the mother figure. Evidences beginning from the Gupta era have placed the mother as the supervisor of a Ganika's household. The Ganikas were also helped by a large number of female attendants who were a constant factor in the Ganika household and this is visible from the earliest references. Then there was also a beginning of an identity formation, and here one can talk about the flag prostitute. The separation of the Ganika and the Vaishya residences in a particular part of the city started taking place mainly from the post-Gupta period onwards, and it is in this background that the pataka or the flag prostitute referred to in the contemporary literature, and there were some public women who resided in creeper cottages in the forest at the outskirts of the city, and they charged minimal fees. So they were probably women workers who were geared to meet the demands of the lower sections of society, and this indicates that there was socio-economic gradation among the class of prostitutes. The representation of the flag also gives an idea of a certain division in the residential location of a category of the sex workers that were meant for lower groups like the malechas and the untouchables. The indispensable role that was played by the mother has been highlighted in several texts of the early medieval period, such as Mritshakatika or Chaturbhani or Dasakumar Charita. So most of these texts have described that how powerful a mother figure was, and ultimately she could call the shots and also decide as to whom the Ganika was going to accompany. The mother was responsible for the grooming and training of the Ganikas since childhood, and as has been pointed out by Shalini Shah, the mother could be either a biological mother or even an adopted one, but the mother had to be there as it was very essential to run the business. So she either served as the supervisor and the trainer of a beginner Ganika in the household, or only as a counselor when she needed some kind of an advice on work. There are also references to adoption of mother when the old mother or the biological mother passed away. So a Ganika could flourish only with the help of a counselor and a supervisor, which was very important for her establishment, so that it does not lead to disorder or chaos in the house, and her household does not become an abode of vagabonds. Now let us discuss the portrayal of Ganikas in art. In the art of early India, the ornamented and decorated representations of the female figurines are mostly inspired by the living style of the Ganikas. The representations of the female figures required some models or replicas, which in the urban and royal culture were present in the form of Ganikas, who were the public women, and so they could be freely reproduced in the sculptures. Of course, the royal women or women belonging to the respected families could not have been reproduced in the sculpture in the way they had the Ganikas could be reproduced. So we have so many voluptuous female figures with sensuous bodies, splendid ornaments, draperies and postures that were represented in the early Indian art, and most of these belonged to those of the Ganikas, as patriarchal norms could not have favored the representation of queens or wives in such a sensuous way. So if we talk about the portrayal of Ganikas in sculpture, Devangana Desai has referred to the terracottas from Kosambi, which depicts a goshti of the Nagarakas and Ganikas, and states that pleasures in the garden or Upvan are portrayed on a large number of terracottas of North India, and such art is reflected also in the cultural art forms, which was largely patronized by the elites. Then on a steatite plaque that was found in Rajgir near Patna, dated around 245 to 105 BCE, there exist panels which represent wine drinking as well as offering. Seema Baba has observed that these scenes and some other scenes from Mathura art belonging to the Kushana period of women being offered wine by their male partners suggest that wine drinking could take place in a secular setting, in a normal social ritual and in religious cult settings also. What one can describe in this kind of series are the Vasant Sena series. The illustration can be taken of the art of post-Mauryan period, where Vasant Sena is shown being offered wine in one scene and kneeling over as if drunk in another, which seems to associate negative side effects of wine drinking with women. And strangely, the same kind of negative impact was not to be seen on men. So, this brings us to the theme of women and wine in early India. It presents a social image of a sophisticated and mature society in relation to wine, in which it is used to showcase social relations, including some kind of intimacy, and on the contrary, in the later periods, wine drinking by women came to be associated with deviant behavior of women who were regarded as immoral. Now, this also brings us to the issue of contemporary trends. The sculptors in any case would tend to portray the current fashions or practices of the elite. The social ideology of the upper and middle class patrons and donors is visible in the sort of urban sophistication and delicate tastefulness that is visible in the post-Mauryan terracottas, sensuous bhangas and luxurious ornamentation of the yakshis of Bharhut as well as Bodh Gaya. So, in most of these sculptural art forms, Ganika appears as an embodiment of youth and beauty. And as has been pointed out by Seema Bawa, this can be associated with specific kind of gender portrayal in several sculptures. The Ganika has been represented as an attractive, youthful woman. Now, unlike the Yakshis who were sculpted as single figures, the Ganikas were usually associated with a large number of figures in sculptural projection, and the Ganika tradition was reflected in several art forms, and various art scholars are also of the view that the ornamented and the decorated representations of several female figurines probably were inspired by the way Ganikas used to dress up and they used to lead their life. So, all this was clearly indicative of an emerging and flourishing urban culture. The Ganikas as public women could be reproduced in these sculptures freely, and several voluptuous female figurines with splendid ornaments, draperies and poses also conveyed patriarchal norms and also kind of there was some kind of entertainment in looking at such figures. So, what was a Ganika's realm? Seema Bawa has depicted two types of sculptures, that is a series of reliefs identified with the Ganika Vasant Sena, who was the protagonist of the plays Daridra Charudatta and Mritchakatika, and the narrative depicting the Ganika Amrapali making a donation of the mango grove to the Buddhist Sangha. Out of the series of reliefs of the Vasant Sena scene, the most complete surviving representation is on the Maholi panel from Mathura belonging to the late 2nd century CE, Kushana period, and made of red Sikri sandstone. The scene is that of a woman kneeling, apparently drunk or overwrought, being supported on the right by a dwarf and on the left by a man of natural proportion. Now, this concept of a kneeling woman supported by two male companions and an attendant on the reverse of a double-sided panel depicting scenes from Mritshakatika, again belonging to this Kushana and made in red sandstone. As you can see, this idea of a kneeling woman after taking wine or after getting intoxicated was a very popular theme, and it also kind of indicated that how a woman was unable to handle intoxication, and women fleeing and also being followed by men after getting intoxicated was another interesting theme that was portrayed in some sculptures. Then there were portrayals of women of palace, most probably Ganikas, enjoying madhupan and also music. So, what emerges is the world of public women, which was quite different from the world of the private women. Male holding the arms of a female in a constraining manner with female attendants, and this kind of a depiction again was clearly of public women. It could not be of private women. Now, the next important development that one can talk about is that of the emergence of the Devadasi system. The first reference to dancing girls in temples is found in Kalidasa's Meghdut. It is said that dancing girls were present at the time of worship in the temple. The custom of dedicating girls to temples became quite common in the 6th century CE, as most of the Puranas containing reference to it have been written during this period, and several Puranas recommended that arrangements should be made to enlist the services of singing girls for worship at temples. By the end of 10th century, the total number of Devadasis in several temples was in direct proportion to the wealth and prestige of the temple. During the medieval period, Devadasis became part of the normal establishment of temples. For example, there were 400 Devadasis which were attached to the temples at Tanjore and Travancore. The popularity of Devadasis seems to have reached its pinnacle around the 10th and 11th century, and Devadasis were they constituted of men as well as women who were dedicated to temple and God's service. They developed the system of music and dance that was employed during several temple festivals and during the process of worship. The rise and fall in the status of Devadasis can be seen to be running parallel to the rise and fall of temples. However, here also we come across a lot of regional variation. The Chola Empire encouraged the Devadasi system, and in Tamil they were known as Devar Adigalar. Devar here means gods in Tamil, and Adigalar means servants. So they were described as God's servants. Several inscriptions also reveal that 400 dancers, they give information about their gurus, orchestras that were maintained by the Brihadishwara temple, Thanjavur, with magnificent grants. So, having discussed all these aspects that were related to women in early India and how there was an evolution in the institution of Ganikas, how they were different from ordinary prostitutes, and how despite their being so resourceful, so important, there were still ambivalences, and they were still kind of categorized as women who had a corrupt character. and how this tradition finally underwent a change, the growing influence of the mother figure in the establishment of Ganika, and then gradually emergence of the Devadasi tradition. So, all these aspects definitely are an eye opener, and they tell us about the kind of gender identity that was there in the past also, and it is for us to reinterpret this available sources and also to look at the non-conventional sources to have a deeper insight into various aspects of a woman's life. Thank you.